Awesome. Thank you. Welcome. All right. Glad you guys found the new registration information. Oh, thanks. Yeah, sorry about that. And I'm going to come up probably with a different long-term solution for this. I'm talking to the Zoom provider. Zoom is the webinar software that I'm using. I may be using a different webinar software soon. Or, oh, it's jumbled. Do you not hear me? Um, I may be needing to use a different webinar software. I may be changing the format. I'm going to talk to some other people, get some advice, and of course, file a police report ASAP. So all of this, something may be changing. I will keep you guys notified. Thank you for being flexible and for understanding. So feel free to write some questions in the chat if you guys want. I'm going to read this one email. I got this in Spanish, so I'm going to translate this. Okay, so I'm getting in contact with you because I need a little bit of help about a narcissistic person. It's someone with whom I haven't conversed during the last 3 months, but I found out a little bit ago that this person will be coming to my city, that this person will be near the places that I usually go. What should I do about this? What do you recommend doing in case I happen to see him? Have you had a situation like this? Thank you for your channel. So yeah, all of us, right? We have these situations. Sometimes people are unfortunately still living in the city with the narcissist, the psychopath, whatever. So it's like an everyday reality for them. Sometimes it's like the people don't live there. In this case, the person is moving there, or maybe you're going to be visiting a city or something like that, and you're worried about running into this person, or you're going to some kind of like professional conference and you happen to be in the same profession and that sort of thing, and you're concerned. So what do? You want to go no contact, live your life and do what works for you. And if this person becomes, you realize this person's like a psychopath and they're stalking you, go to the police. And if not, if they're just rude or catty, like they're across the room, like they're gossiping about you, they're just trying to get under your skin, just leave. Just don't even hang out around people like that. And I wouldn't give this person the time of day. I would simply ignore their very existence, and prove to them that they're just like a meaningless, to you. And that's if they're harmless. If they're actually dangerous and they're making threats, whether they are covert and indirect threats, like they're mentioning things like guns and violence and blood, and they're dropping all these hints, then I would definitely go to the police about that. Those are indirect, covert, aggressive manipulation tactics. If they're not, and they're just being who they are, and they're just trying to get under your skin, but they're harmless, then I would completely ignore them in that context. I would walk past them, not even look at them, pretend like they don't exist, don't pay any attention. If they should try to talk to you again, I would just keep walking, keep moving. If they become annoying and they're like really, really, really trying to get your attention, and again, usually narcissists are not that interested in making a fool out of themselves, because usually the most important thing to them is their public perception. So usually they're not going to make a fool of themselves in public. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they just lose it, particularly the borderline personality disordered individuals. Sometimes they have even less control over their actions. They have a severe impulse control problem. So they might do something. They could be violent. They could just be, have some sort of outburst and whatnot, that could create some kind of scene. I would just walk away. Don't engage in that. Don't talk back, don't answer any questions, don't defend yourself in any sort of way. And if it gets really uncomfortable, I would just leave the environment. But don't let them make you afraid. it's also your city. You live there and you like to go to these places, and if the person really starts stalking you and creating a problem, then go to the authorities. But if not, I would just ignore it. That's going to be boring to the narcissist. They're looking for something juicy. They're looking for something dramatic. They're looking for someone to provoke, who will give in and respond to them. And if you don't, then you're boring to them and you're not giving them the narcissistic supply. They will go away. They will inevitably go away. They will find a new target because they're hopelessly dependent upon that supply. They can't survive without that supply. Okay, so someone says, I figured out why therapists will suggest ways to deal with narcissistic family dynamics, and why the online expert coaches almost always suggest no contact. It's because a lot of the therapists that specialize in narcissism are trained in family systems therapy. Interesting. So I'm not familiar with that. I'm not sure what exactly that entails, the family systems therapy. So, and they're suggesting ways to deal with the narcissistic family dynamics, you're saying, through the family systems therapy. I don't know what that is. My guess is that therapy applies to families where there isn't a predator, a malignant narcissist, or a borderline personality disorder individual, a psychopath, sociopath, because I don't think that the traditional rules apply. I think that it might be what Dr. George Simon was referring to as the traditional psychotherapy. I don't know if the family systems therapy falls under that, the Freudian type of psychoanalysis, which applies to people who have neuroses, codependence, for example, but doesn't apply to people with personality disorders, with the cluster B personality disorders, because they don't play by the same rules as the rest of us. Their conscience doesn't work like the rest of us. They have a personality disorder. So I'm not sure if that's part of that, if that's why. Jerry Wise, she says, is great for family systems on YouTube. Jerry Wise, W-I-S-E. She also adds, which is a really helpful tool for healing from this. I found that the more I understand the systems theory, the more I'm coming to terms with my family. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to look up Jerry Wise to hear about that. I'm guessing that it's something to do with like the roles that you play in your family, like to understand like your childhood wounding, the inner child wounding and whatnot. And then how you end up playing out those roles as an adult, like you get triggered into your child, then you revert back to the child. And then when someone, triggers you with a similar thing that one of your parents would do, and being able to breaking free from the role. Yeah. Being able to break free from that, not responding, not reacting in the same way. That's awesome. Thanks for that tip. I'm going to check him out. I just finished reading John Bradshaw, Homecoming, Reclaiming and Healing Your Inner Child. This is a fantastic book. He's got a bunch of YouTube videos too. I'm not sure if he's still alive. I know he's been around for a while. A lot of his videos look pretty old, maybe the 80s or the 90s. And wow, fantastic. Like I wish I had read that stuff years ago. Really highly recommend listening to his videos. I mean, he's got like hours and hours long seminars on there. Really great information on the same exact thing. I think he's probably in that same dynamic. Though he does make the distinction, in the book, he says, like, I forget the word, he didn't use the word predator, but I think he said the word dangerous. If your parent is dangerous, it's best not to have contact. So I'm not sure if that's exactly the same thing, but it sounded kind of similar. She says, I believe my mom is BPD and NPD. Yeah, there's a lot of what they call comorbidity. Comorbidity meaning they share traits. You can have a borderline who has psychopathic traits, or psychopath who has some borderline traits, or narcissist with some borderline traits. I mean, so narcissists with histrionic traits, like they can be all across the board. So I think it's really more of a spectrum. And I really think that cluster B maybe needs to be kind of recategorized in some different ways so people can understand this better and not feel like so caught up in having to figure out which label is the correct label. Someone just posted a video link here. That might be Jerry Wise. I'm not sure. Yeah, but back to the family systems therapy. Is it therapy? Yeah, family systems therapy. You know, the idea of the roles that you play and the roles you played in childhood. We were talking about that in the earlier session tonight too. Like, what roles? Oh, thank you. That's the John Bradshaw video. What roles did you play as a child? You know, can you think about that? And are you still playing that same role in your family dynamics? Like, are you always the one to caretake? Are you always the savior? Are you always the star? Are you always the overachiever? Are you always the rebel? You know, and like, and how, like, notice in your interactions with your parents, especially, how maybe in your life, like, you know, you're this like grown ass adult, right? And then like you get around your mom and all of a sudden like it just breaks down and you're like a child again, right? Like you're reverting to those old patterns. So we got to become more conscious and aware and observe ourselves so that we can respond rather than react. And there's like a funny, I think it's like a Buddhist saying, and it's like, you know, maybe Ram Dass said it, Richard Alpert, like if you think you're enlightened, go spend a weekend with your mom, you know. That's so true, because it will really trigger all those old wounds, the old roles. You'll find yourself suddenly, yeah, Ram Dass said that. Yeah, I think Richard Alpert is his birth name, right? And then Ram Dass is the name he took after he was studying in India with his teacher Maharaji, I think, Maharaji. If you can give some common examples of narc behavior amongst friends. Okay. Wow, so big topic. For example, these would be your friends who are always getting from you something. Like they're always calling you for advice, or they're always calling you when they're lonely, or they're always calling you when they're anxious or bored. And you're like, I really got to do this thing, or I'm really busy, or whatever. And they just don't respect the boundary. Quickest way to find the toxic person in the room is set a new boundary and discover who's toxic and not. The toxic person will 100% of the time violate your boundary, you know, push the boundary, use covert aggressive manipulation tactics, even like guilt tripping you, or it's not obvious what they're doing unless you know that that's actually a covert aggressive manipulation tactic. So, you know, you'll find these kinds of things like where they're, as soon as you set that boundary, they're going to rebel against that. They're going to try to make you feel guilty for setting the boundary. They're going to try to shame you for setting the boundary. They're going to try to tell you that you're wrong, that you're selfish, you know, that kind of stuff. Walk away from those people. What would one tactic be? One tactic of what specifically? I'm sorry. Just want to make sure I'm understanding what the question is. Like something covert. Well, like the guilt tripping is covert. So, you know, gosh, let's make up an example. You know, you say, okay, I can't do this, or, you know, your friend invites you to go do this thing, or they ask you to do this thing, and you're like, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I have this thing. And they're like, oh, well, I guess I'll just go alone. You know, it's, you know, and they make up something to like, I can't even think of like an actual example that happened recently, but like they'll create something that makes you feel like you're responsible and it's your fault. It's your fault that they have to go alone, and it's in, and then they're going to even, maybe they'll keep adding on top of that, and you know it's dangerous in that area, and I really don't want to, what if something happens to me? And then on top of that, then they'll try to imply that it's all your fault. You know, would you be able to live with that? You know, if something happened to me. I mean, this kind of bullshit, you know, that's guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is when they make you feel false guilt. It's not your fault. Guilt serves the conscience. Guilt is the mediator of conscience. It tells you when you need to own something and take responsibility for something and make it right, when you made a decision that was out of your integrity, right? So that's healthy guilt. That's the kind of guilt you feel when you've done something wrong to someone, when you've hurt someone, when you've made a decision that somehow was out of your own integrity. Like maybe you didn't even hurt someone else, but you took an action that didn't feel good to you because it's not in alignment with your values and who you believe that you are. The guilt tripping is false guilt. And that is when a person tries to get you to accept guilt for something you didn't do, or something that wasn't your fault, or maybe was their fault and their responsibility, and now they're making it your responsibility. The more covert narcissists love this tactic. The borderlines love this tactic. It is their choice tactic. Maybe you go to visit your mom and, she's like, oh, so great to see you. And, the time really went by so fast. And I know you have a lot of other people to see. And it just felt like we didn't really get to see you, that kind of thing. It's all guilt tripping. That's covert aggressive manipulation tactics. And the crazy thing is, when we grew up in families, like I grew up in that Italian side of the family, famous for the guilt tripping. Greeks are famous for that. Jews are famous for that. There's like specific ethnic groups, Catholics especially, love to use the guilt tripping because it's their mojo, and you just like, oh, that's just mom, that's just grandma, that's just auntie so-and-so. No, it's not just them. This is a covert aggressive manipulation tactic, and they're doing it to control you. And once you recognize that, and I got that out of George Simon's book, especially Dr. George Simon's book, In Sheep's Clothing. Once you really see it for what it is, and you notice that, and it's so clear, and then you can really see when people are using like emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail is another covert tactic that you'll find. Friends will do this too. It could be anyone. But for example, they're impositioning themselves, and you're ignoring all of this. And then they're like, well, just give me this, and then I promise I'll go away and I'll leave you alone. No, don't ever do that. Because if you give in, then you're giving into the control. That's emotional blackmail. They're blackmailing you. They're saying, if you do this, I will stop stalking, annoying, violating your boundaries. That's a bunch of horse shit. So when you see that kind of, covert aggressive stuff, open your eyes to that and recognize that there are a lot of these manipulators that don't use those overt, aggressive, out in the open, obvious kinds of ways, that a lot of them use these very covert, aggressive ways. It's meant to be very stealth. It's meant to not be noticed. And it's meant just to trigger your guilt, and in your reaction in that way. So it's really good to be aware of, those tactics. I would check out George Simon's book if you haven't already. She also says, why does it seem like there are so many narcs and borderlines around? Is this mainly because I'm a codependent, so these are the people I've attracted? Yeah, most likely. Yes, there are a lot of them around. Statistics say it's 1 in 10, 1 in 11 people is on the cluster B spectrum disorder. Again, we can't know that for sure because most of those people never go to get help. They don't believe they have a problem, or they know they have a problem and they specifically avoid it. Or they go to therapy, maybe with another narcissist, and they create some kind of like binary narcissist, relationship with them. They're both getting supply off of each other in some way, and they're never addressing the issue. Or maybe they just find a therapist who's clueless and doesn't recognize that this is a narcissist, and that therapist is actually codependent, and they get hooked in, to the manipulation, or, and these things just never get reported. Right. But so if we're saying 1 in 10 people, that's millions and millions and millions of people around the world who have these cluster B personality disorders. So then you add on top of that, it's like the density of those people around you is probably higher than around a lot of other people who weren't raised in that environment. So if you were raised in an environment where there was a narcissistic parent or caregiver, or an alcoholic or addict parent or caregiver, you would tend to be surrounded by these people until you heal those inner child wounds, until you heal the hook inside yourself that's attracting that, that will be all around you. But as you heal yourself, the people that you attract and the people around you are very different. And then every now and then one of these predators will come by, and it'll be like, ding, right away. Like you'll see it. Something will feel weird at first. Maybe you can't quite put your finger on it. And then suddenly it's just like so clear. And then you know exactly who you're dealing with. And you don't have that doubt that you would have before you knew, what was going on, and what were these tactics, and what did they do, and how does that relate to me and my patterns? Because once you change yourself, everything around you changes, as above, so below, they say. I'm going to order that book right now. Good. Yeah, you're going to love that book. That book is phenomenal. Just excellent, excellent book. Someone says, right, my ex kept saying over and over, I just need closure. when we had closure almost 5 times already. He tried to convince me that we needed a better ending. I didn't know how it would be better. I think he just wanted sex one more time and then one more time. Yeah, I'm not sure what that was about. Yeah, that's possible. If that was his form of narcissistic supply, if that was the main form of narcissistic supply was the sex, you know, he was maybe more of the sex addict, you know, then maybe he was using that. Maybe he was like, you know, using this idea of closure, you know, hang the carrot on the stick. Here, I promise you'll get closure this time. Come back for one more round of madness and insanity. I promise I'll give you closure, you know, and then he gets in and gets what he wants, and then you don't get closure again. And then that sort of thing will happen. Um, yeah, you know, the closure, unfortunately, you never get with the cluster B type. You just don't. It's not like a normal human where you can talk about shit. Like, you can't have that kind of conversation, because when they don't want to talk about something, they just shut it down. They just don't talk about it. And you can't get closure in that way. The closure involves two people having some kind of open discussion about feelings and perceptions and thoughts about things, and it's just not going to happen. And it's really better to give yourself that closure. And that closure really is acceptance, like acceptance of understanding who you're dealing with, you know, that you're dealing with a manipulative, abusive person who's likely never ever going to change and likely going to keep repeating these same exact patterns. And the only way to get closure is to walk away from that and accept who they are, accept and ask yourself, you know, why did I attract this situation in my life? It's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you deserved it. It's because you have a wound that you need to heal. And that person came into your life to touch that wound and make you aware of it, because it was buried, you know, until then, stuffed away and festering and eating away at you psychologically, physically, you know, in many, spiritually, in many different ways. And that person came along to trigger that, so that you can see that wound inside of you, you know, and work on that wound and heal that wound. And you getting healthy is the best closure, you know, accepting what it is and then taking steps to get yourself healthy. That's how you move forward. That's how you get clear. That's how, you know, your life starts to come back online. That's how you start to thrive in life. Be that closure for yourself. Give yourself that closure. And don't look to the manipulative person for that, because the only thing waiting there is more insanity. Someone says, my narc husband says that if we ever divorced, we should still have sex. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. You know, that's him wanting his cake and eating it too, you know, keeping you as a form of sexual supply while he has other forms of supply. I would have no more contact. I mean, sex with a predator is just so dangerous, because you're so vulnerable and open, you know, and it's creating all of these hormones like oxytocin, which is the trust and bonding hormone. And once that's released, and things become very confusing, and biologically your system is looking to like mate with this person and trust this person and be attached to this person, and consciously it's very difficult to override that unless you're aware of what's happening. And even still, you know, so I really don't recommend it. You know, once you get to that point in the relationship where you realize this is toxic and you're trying to find the way out and all that, I would stop having sex with that person immediately. I would cut that off. You know, they will go somewhere else for that. That's fine. You know, you don't have to accept that and get over that part. You know, that's going to hurt, you know, the feeling of betrayal and there was someone else. And that's hard at first if you still love that person, but it's really best to cut that off. You know, there's just keeping opening yourself in that way. It's not healthy, you know, to that predator kind of person. And I mean, other things could happen. Like that person is probably with other people. You know, if you're not protecting yourself, they could be exposing you to diseases. If you're a woman, what if you got pregnant? That would be like the worst case scenario. Like you definitely don't want to get pregnant with the predator's baby, you know, definitely not. And you can't trust them, because they could just totally betray your trust and try to get you pregnant. Or if it's the woman, she can try to get pregnant and trap you as the guy. So I would not do that. I would not do that at all. I don't recommend that. It just puts you in a very dangerous physical and psychological place. The person from before said, so true, when they don't want to talk about it, then just shut you out. So his closure would be, say what I want to hear, and if you don't, then screw you. I mean, he would probably say everything right to try to sleep with me, and then afterwards tell me how it wouldn't work out. Just sad. Yeah, that kind of stuff exactly can happen. They can tell you exactly what you want to hear. That's why it's so dangerous. And if you count on those words and then you open yourself up again and you have sex again with that person, you just made yourself even more vulnerable, and then you're going to feel even more let down, because inevitably they're going to let you down. It may not be in that very moment, but it could be too, but it's going to be quickly after that. It's going to happen. On the topic of sex, my current partner and I waited a couple months and I decided to have sex. After we had sex, I was so sad because all I could think about was my ex. I didn't see that coming. Any suggestions on how to overcome this? So what I would say is it's still too soon. It's still too soon for you. I would take a break from sex. I would be abstinent for a period of time, 6 months, 1 year, maybe longer. If that's still happening, where you're still triggered thinking about your ex, missing your ex, it's still too early. You still have more healing to do. Man, I thought being 6 months later, I'd be fine. I guess not. It could just be that you need more time. Some people need a year or longer to heal from these relationships, and the more devastating it was, the longer you might need, so be patient with yourself and allow yourself that time, and don't beat yourself up, for what happened. That's okay. It was a learning experience. And what did you learn? You learned maybe that it's still too early, that you still have more healing work to do. You're not quite yet ready to open that portal, that door with someone new in your life. I think I missed a couple things. Let me catch up back here. Okay, someone says, it's been 3.5 months of no contact. I found a couple items of his as I've been cleaning things out, thinking of mailing them to him, but it feels like I would be breaking my sense of no contact. I thought of waiting and just seeing if at some point he wants the small item back, but I'm also not ready to block all contact on phone, so I wouldn't know. I'm also about ready to block all contact on phone, so I wouldn't know. Seeing most of my friendships with narcissists, lately my neighbor has been coming over late at night looking for support, a bit supportive, but also minimizes my issues, thinking of how to avoid. I tried in the past to say a couple things and she got so mad and wouldn't talk for a year. Working on healing negative beliefs, learning so much from you and others, feel better, stronger, also tired, more grief coming up. Wish they had more support groups for this in person. So grateful and look forward to Mondays with your Sana group. Thank you. You're welcome. Back to your questions. Okay. 3.5 months, no contact. Okay. Items of his, I would get rid of that stuff. Take it to Goodwill, throw it away. I would not mail it. I would not have any contact about it. I would not keep it. That stuff is like a beacon of energy. It's got his energy on it. It's in your house, your apartment, whatever. Like, I would get that out of there because it's creating that connection with him. I'm also about ready to block all contact on phone. That would be good. That would be a really great idea, to block all contact entirely across the board. Phone, social media, everything. Okay, good. It looks like you're seeing more about your relationships with your friendships as well. Yeah, that's the thing. Once you start doing that inventory in your life, you start to recognize, as you get the toxic people out, all of the other toxic people that you had in your life and that you didn't realize, and then keep weeding those people out. And as you're doing that, you're creating more aloneness probably in your life, but you're also creating more space. And this is a great time right now to create space for what you actually want in your life. And you got to get that stuff out first. You got to get those people out. You got to cut off your energy from that so that it stops, sucking away all your energy, even if it's like unconsciously, even if you're not having a lot of contact with them, but the door is still open and there's still something, you're losing energy there, and that toxicity is bleeding into your life and it's affecting you. With your neighbor, yeah, it sounds like taking advantage. You tried to say a couple things in the past. She got so mad she wouldn't talk for a year. That's a clear sign. That's a very toxic person. I would set really clear boundaries with that person. I wouldn't leave room for that in your life. Just kind of like, if it's your neighbors, hey, great day, that's it. I wouldn't even like ask questions like, hey, how's it going? How you doing? I wouldn't ask any of that. It's just an open door for them to start talking and taking advantage. So I would just be in a hurry, be in and out. Don't have to answer the door. You don't have to answer the phone. Even if she knows you're home and she can hear you inside, doesn't matter. You still don't have to answer that door. It's your house. It's your boundary. You get to choose what you do with it, and don't let anyone bully you into thinking that you have to respond to them because they want your attention. That's a sign of a toxic person. And that's great that you're working on healing your negative beliefs and you're starting to feel better and stronger. If you're tired, look at the boundaries. You mentioned tired and the grief is coming up. That's good. Keep allowing yourself to process that grief. Could be that part of the tiredness is because you're processing the grief. When we detox, we get tired, because you're losing lots of stuff. You're getting rid of lots of stuff. Like there's like recalibration happening, and you may need more sleep. You may need more rest. So allow that time for yourself. If that's what you feel, don't give yourself a hard time about that. Oh man, I need to sleep like 9 hours to feel good. It's okay. For a period of time, maybe you need to sleep 9 hours a night. That's okay. Make time for that. Make the time for the self-care, because the self-care is the foundation for the self-love. It starts with self-honesty, and then it builds as you take care of yourself. And that's how the self-love grows and grows and grows, because the more you take care of yourself, the more your subconscious understands that you love yourself. So be there for yourself first. When it comes down to taking care of you or taking care of someone else, take care of you. Take care of you first, always. Our old patterns of codependency is to take care of someone else first. And as Dr. Gabor Mate says, that will set you up for a chronic illness. The risk factor of chronic illness is significantly higher with people pleasers, people who chronically put other people's needs before their own. It will eat your body alive. And it's really good to take control of that, and recognize that you need to take control of your health. You need to take control of your life. You need to not let other people dictate where you are and what you're doing and what you're giving and or dictate your approval and your validation of yourself. Maybe they're like, well, then you don't matter if you don't take care of me, or you're not a good person if you don't take care of me. Walk away from that, because that person is trying to manipulate you into taking care of them and, making them your responsibility, and they are not. Someone else says, I am struggling to reconcile the loss that my soul feels with knowing that I made the right choice to leave my ex-narc. Even though I know I did the right thing, why is it so hard for me to move on? It's been 2 months and I think about him all the time. Is it possible to have a soulful connection with a narc, or did he just bring attention to my childhood wounds that I never resolved? He met so many of my needs that my inner child was longing for. I became addicted to the awesome highs that I felt. I felt alive, beautiful, sexy, smart, everything I never felt before, even as an adult, but I also felt depressed and used and abused. He unknowingly and indirectly forced me to realize that I have unresolved issues. So I'm torn between letting him go and using him to identify and bring attention to issues that I suppress. Okay, so it's good that you recognize that he is triggering these issues, that these are unresolved inner child wounding issues. Now, you don't need to keep him in your life to do that work. When you leave him, you will have plenty of flashbacks that will help you work that out. And that's like trying to make light of something really serious and heavy, because those flashbacks can be really intense. That's all the memories, all the things he said, all the things he did, all those like unresolved, what the fuck happened in that scenario kind of thing. All of that will come up. It will haunt you in the aftermath. And that doesn't really even begin until you leave the person. That's when the PTSD crash hits, is when you get to safety, when you get out of that survival, live or die environment that you're in. So you'll have plenty of opportunity to process these inner child wounds. I would also recommend finding a therapist near you that can help you to process that, having allies, and support in that way, and can help talk you through that process, and guide you through there, help ask you questions and stuff. Also, if that's what you're working on, the inner child stuff, check out John Bradshaw, his inner child work, his videos, his book, Homecoming. You can do a lot of this work yourself, but when you get into like the heavy stuff, you might want to, get a therapist on board and get some help, especially if it's really complicated and really heavy. But you don't need to hang around him to figure it out. You don't. I wouldn't stay for that reason, and I would ask yourself, why are you really staying? What is really holding you there? Right. And I know it's really, really hard to feel like that soul loss. Like 2 months, you guys have been, I'm guessing, separated, but you're still having some kind of connection with this person. Knowing that you made the right choice, you even said, right? It's still so hard to move on because of the addiction factor. It literally is like an addiction. It's like you had an addiction with an opiate, like heroin, for however long that relationship went on. Because that relationship, that toxic relationship, was creating a brain high, brain drugs, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, like so many different brain drugs that were happening, so many different physiological things that were happening, so many distractions from what you actually feel, in your life. All of this was going on, which is why when you leave the person, it feels like it's so much worse at first. It's the withdrawal period. You're withdrawing from the drug, essentially. So it's really rough. And that's why people have like this intense craving for the abuser, just like people have the intense craving for a drug. It's not about the substance, it's about the feeling that you got that took place in that relationship. All those chemicals and hormones created a certain feeling, and that feeling masked the empty feeling that you have inside from the unresolved childhood wounds, growing up with a caretaker who had some of these tendencies or in some way was not there for you. You didn't get your developmental needs met as an infant, as a child, therefore it's following you as an adult now. And so now you're meeting this person who's bringing all this up in you to face. And it's so hard when you're first leaving them, and it gets better, and it gets a lot better, a lot faster when there's no contact. And when I say no contact, I mean not just having actual contact, but in all the ways that we fool ourselves into thinking that we're no contact. And I did one video about that a little while ago, something about all the ways that, when you think you're no contact, but you're still in contact, driving by his place or her place, or hoping to run into them somewhere, or creeping on their social media or something, you're still in contact, or just sitting there and dreaming about them and thinking about them, still creating that bond. As you're remembering, and you're dwelling on that stuff, it's like you're living it in the here and now. And so it's like you're still in that relationship, even though that person isn't there. And then it's like the craving is more intense. That's the obsession that will be characteristic of the particular kind of PTSD that a person will get from an abusive relationship. You said he met so many of my needs that my inner child was longing for. It's not that he meets your needs. He pretended to fulfill those needs at the beginning because he saw what those were. He pretended to fill those. So you became attached to him because you didn't get those needs as a child. So you had some kind of insatiable neediness around that. That's all codependents would have that, right? It's the emptiness we're trying to fulfill. And so, we're looking for this person, to meet those needs. But really, you need to resolve those needs within yourself. You can't look to another person for that. And it could be dangerous, so you got to recognize, like, what were those unmet needs? Did you not feel welcome? Do you not feel like you belong? Do you feel really lonely? Are those the needs? Or was it the infantile state that was, the most damage happened? So then you got to be there for your inner child, your inner little girl, your inner little boy, and you got to have like a little talk with your inner child and pull them in close and hug them and tell them, I'm so happy you're here. You are so welcome in this world. I am happy to meet your needs, and I understand that you have needs, and you belong here, and you have a right to be here, and like whatever you need to tell this little inner child, and to start creating this relationship with that part of you that kind of fragmented off because of the abuse or the neglect and the trauma of it all. And you really want to get back in contact with that. And then it's like you're reparenting your inner child. Like you're becoming the parent that you never had, instead of looking to your partner to become that parent that you never had, because that's where the disaster happens. That's where that narcissistic codependency link happens. And then it's just a mess, right? So you want to avoid getting into those situations again. So you want to reparent your own inner child, be there for yourself, fulfill your needs, and then eventually meet someone who resonates with you as an adult, someone who's happy to share loving touch and wants to be around you and wants to make you a priority and wants to show you that you matter to them, in the ways that they show you that you matter, without feeling like, you need to get this thing from this person. You're already fulfilled and whole as a person, as a being inside. But you meet this person now, and now you have that much more. It's like your glass is overflowing now, with upliftment and positive energy and love and that sort of stuff. And you can have amazing experiences where you snuggle with this person and you just feel so loved and so close. And, maybe you even have a spontaneous age regression where you remember, as an infant, you didn't have that. No one really held you. No one really told you you're safe and you're loved and you're welcome and you're wanted, but first you got to be there for yourself to recognize what those wounds are, to heal that for yourself, to be that parent. That way you don't look for your next partner to be that parent, or your current partner, or your mother to be that parent that she will never be, or your father to be that parent that he will never be, or your boss to be that parent, or anyone else in your life, because that's essentially the dynamic that just keeps repeating over and over again. So stick with it, be strong. The longer the period that goes on of complete no contact, the easier and easier it gets. Those withdrawals at the beginning can be really intense. That's why it's usually really good to have a support network of people who get it, of people who have been there, of people who can let you feel what you feel and tell you it's okay, it's perfectly normal, there's nothing wrong with you, I was there, we were there, and it's going to get better. And it is going to get better. Okay. Someone says, I want to keep dating the man I've been seeing, but after the sex and my disappointment, I don't know what to tell him. I want to tell him why I'm withdrawing so much, but I feel like bringing up the ex is such a bad idea. The man I'm seeing is very nice and respectful. If you don't feel comfortable talking about that, you might just say something like, I'm healing right now. I really need to spend time healing myself from some past situations. And if you don't really want to bring that up and really talk about the situation, you can just leave it there, and I know it's really hard to tell somebody, to let somebody down, to tell somebody you can't see them again. But if you're not able to really connect and be present with that person, it's because you have more healing work to do. And it's really better to go do that rather than to keep engaging there, because eventually you're going to get caught in some kind of toxic dynamic. Even if he's a nice and respectful person, something will become toxic about that because there's something left, unhealed inside. Okay, someone says, oops, I skipped one. They will prohibit their partners from something under the threat of punishment if their partner does something. I don't know what that means. They will ask to watch and say it is only so they can learn to please their partner. They will insist that their mate watch, I think that means porn, although the mate doesn't usually do that. Sexual gratification is only to reassure the narcissist that they are good lovers. The narcissist pretends that sex is for the partner, but is after his or her gratification only. The partner's sexual past will be torn apart or thrown in their face during or after the relationship. The narcissist revels in telling their partner all about their sexual past and that he or she will never measure up to their other lovers. The narcissist may freeze their partner out of sex altogether while calling them a nymphomaniac. Okay, there's a lot more information on here. I think is this from someone's website about the narcissist relationship with sex? I'm not going to read all of this, but yes, these are all, the most important thing to understand: sex with a narcissist is never about the sex itself. It's about the control. It's about the power. And that works slightly different for different people and for different brands of narcissists. But inevitably, it is about power and control. It's not about the intimacy. It's not about the connection, even though you might be fooled into believing that you're a lot closer to that person than you really are, and that's the danger of that sexual connection, is you could assume that that's intimacy when it's just a physical sexual connection. It's not an emotional or spiritual, deeper connection with that person at all, because they're incapable of that. And they're just using that as a tool to manipulate you. Yeah. And like she wrote in here, in this message, they'll always compare you, even if it's indirectly, if not directly, they'll always talk about their exes. I mean, you will know down to like the way they wear their pubic hair. Like they will tell you every little detail about their ex. Like you're like, why are you even telling this information? Because they're using it as a tool. They want to make you self-conscious. They want to make you feel like you got to measure up, or you got to like please them or win them over, or just set the bar to tell you that like, you're never going to meet this bar. You're never going to be good enough. And then you start to doubt yourself. So across the board, it's always about control. Someone says, I watched a video today on respect with Dr. George Simon. He spoke about how respect should be earned and not given. A lot of people feel weary about this because most of us were taught to respect elders and others freely. I feel like this is a trap. My narc used to say to me, I was so rude for not respecting his mother, but she treated me so awful. Basically, my narc was saying in translation, you don't respect my mom because you won't cater to her, even though she walks all over you. I don't know how to handle this in everyday life. So many people think that you should always treat people with respect, but I think that is a setup with narcs. Right. So it is dangerous, right? Because, that's the whole thing about like politeness, like feeling like you have to be polite to everyone, or you have to like always treat people with respect, but you don't owe people respect when they're not treating you with respect. Like if you tried to respect them and they're showing you that they have a whole different idea of what is respect, and that's completely disrespectful to you, then you don't owe them your respect anymore. You need to set a boundary, because that's not safe for you. It's not safe. You can't maintain your level of self-respect if you engage with that person, because they don't respect you. So no, we don't owe people that. We definitely don't. And it says a lot more about, their behavior. Like you're a person who is respectful, welcoming to people, kind to people, but you have to have a boundary on that. Like when you find a toxic person, you have to set that boundary. Otherwise, everything else in your life is going to get messed up. If your compassion doesn't have limits, you're not going to have compassion anymore. You're not going to be able to be compassionate, because you'll be wasting it on people who are abusing it. You don't want to do that. You don't want to get caught in those traps. Yeah, that was a trap. Just like you said, that your ex was doing that. You're supposed to like just ignore the fact that she treats you like shit and just like pretend like nothing is happening. That's the whole narcissistic setup, is you're the victim, you deal with it and pretend like nothing is happening. No, you don't have to play that game. You don't have to sit there and pretend like the pink elephant is not sitting in the room. Like, it sounds like this is your ex, right? You're not in that situation. But if any of you are still in that situation, like you don't have to hang out. Like if your in-laws are treating you like shit, stop visiting your in-laws. Stop allowing them to visit you. Stop having contact with them. If your partner doesn't grow a pair and stand up and understand what's going on and not set boundaries with his or her own family, that's not a safe relationship. It might not be that your partner is a bad person, but it might be that your partner is not having boundaries and not keeping you safe. And they're insisting, oh, that's my mom, that's my dad, we just got to deal with it. We just got to have them here at the house, or you just got to go to Thanksgiving, or you just got to go to Christmas. No, you don't. You don't just got to do anything that you don't want to do. When people are not treating you right, you do not owe them anything. And, you know, I know it's really hard when it comes down to these like familial obligations and stuff. Set your own bar, you know, ask yourself, where do you need to say no? You know, what are 3 places or what are 3 people or 3 situations in your life where you need to say no, you know, because it's not healthy for you? This might be one of them. I mean, it sounds like an X situation for you, but if you're in a situation like that, say no. You know, don't allow those people to keep walking over you, and don't allow your partner to enable that. That's not healthy. Your partner is not healthy if they're enabling that. They're not on your team, you know, and you got to be on a team with your partner. Otherwise, what are you doing, you know, in that relationship? Someone says, I've been in therapy for a year now, and my sessions are only once a month since my therapist believes that I really don't need her. Anyways, I feel like I can date again, but I'm hesitant to do the online dating thing. Any suggestions or advice? Okay, so, you know, if you feel like you want to start getting out, test the waters a bit, date a little bit, you know, understand that this is going to be a learning experience, you know, and if you do the online dating thing, what I would recommend is putting a minimal profile up. If you are a woman, I would not put up photos that really show your body or, you know, really make you look sexy or something else, or attract any of that kind of energy. I would keep things, you know, pretty G-rated and all that, and not put a lot of personal information in your profile. And I would heavily screen the messages that you get. And this could be a great learning experience for you in setting boundaries. It was for me. You will get messages, and what you'll realize really quickly is that you don't have to respond to those messages. You don't owe people them. What you'll notice is that the narcissists and the predators will reveal themselves. So maybe someone will write to you and you're not interested. You don't get a good vibe. And the great thing is, like, you can even practice tuning into those vibes from the computer screen. Take a look at the photo and just instantly ask yourself how you feel inside your body. What's your instant reaction? Does it feel strong and good? You know, or does it feel weak and not good? That's your answer. You know, delete that person. Don't look at that person if it doesn't feel good. When you get a message from a person, read the message, and before you even respond, ask yourself how that feels. You know, if you get a weird feeling, don't respond at all. If you want to test the waters, you can see. But if you're getting that feeling, I would listen to the intuition first and foremost. I wouldn't even investigate that all that deeply. Just listen to the feeling. It's also a self-trust building exercise. If you get a message from someone, they're like, you know, it's that covert guilt tripping kind of thing. Oh, you know, sent you a message a week ago or whatever, and sure, you get lots of messages, but maybe you'll find time for little old me. Or, you know, sent you a message, and, you know, maybe you have a thing against this race of people, and that's why you're not responding. You know, that kind of like, you know, it's like they're covertly blaming you for being a racist just because you didn't respond to them or something. Don't even answer that. Don't even get involved in any kind of back and forth. Don't justify yourself. Don't defend yourself, because that's what the narcissist does. Is they try to make you feel like you're at fault for something. They'll try to criticize you for something, and then you start defending yourself, and then you're caught in their loop. Don't even waste your time. Don't even respond to those people. You don't owe them an answer. If you grew up in a house with a narcissist or some kind of abusive parent, what you learned is, like, when they called your name, you ran quickly, like, and you jumped, you know, immediately. Or, and like, maybe even as an adult, you notice, like, it's really hard for you, like, not to answer the phone when they call, or not to answer the door when they're there. This is good practice. Getting those messages and not answering. You don't owe anybody anything, you know, and keep checking in with yourself. And when you meet somebody and you have a couple messages and it's like, okay, this is interesting. We're having an interesting conversation. Not seeing any red flags here, feeling pretty good. Maybe you have a few back and forths, and it seems like you have a bit in common with this person, or at least some good, you know, conversation going on. And then maybe you agree to meet in a public place to have coffee or a drink, you know, and that's great. So, you know, I would not give your phone number. I would keep all the contact through the online dating site, until you're certain that you want to date this person longer term. I wouldn't give your phone number, because there's just one more person that, who's got your phone number now, that you don't want to have your phone number if it turns out to be not good. And listen to your gut feeling more than anything in that very initial first few meeting in person, when your energy is right there in front of that person. Tune in. How do I feel right now? How do I feel right now? And tune into your body, tune into your emotions, tune into your thoughts. Really notice what's coming up for you. Notice how easy is it for you to express yourself, or is it very difficult? Do you feel judged? Do you feel the person is celebrating what you're saying and interested in what you're saying? And there's like a back and forth. Are you having like a little bit of a deep conversation? Is this person, did they have some similar values that you have? Are they into some similar lifestyle practices that you're into? You want to start looking for these kinds of things, from date one, and keep it kind of short. Maybe have one drink, maybe two, if it's a really good conversation, you're getting a really good vibe, and then, okay, great to see you, maybe they say something, let's get in contact again for another date. And if you agree, you can say, sounds good, and if you don't, then you can just tell them straight up, it's really nice to meet you. I'm just not feeling it, but I wish you all the best. And, and they could just end it clean right there. You didn't give the person your phone number or anything. That's it. They're going to, they'll find someone else, and you can keep searching online. And I would recommend meeting people, don't just settle for the first person that you go on a date with, right. Getting out of the healing period, like meet some people and go on dates, and again, I mean, dating, not fucking, right? Like going on dates, having coffee, having a drink, and just getting to know somebody and getting to know yourself again and seeing yourself through this experience, and keep checking in. How do I feel right now? Scale of 1 to 10, what feels really good? What doesn't feel really good? What do I like about what this person is presenting? What do I not like? Do I see any red flags? Do we have much in common? Keep asking questions and keep evaluating things. Take things a bit slow, wait at least several days, if not a week, to see that person again. At the beginning, I would wait at least a week, after the first date to the second date. I would wait another week to the third date if possible, and then maybe if you really like that person, maybe you can start to see them 2 times a week, and maybe 3 times a week, but don't dive all in right away. Take things slowly, because people will reveal themselves and you'll get a sense. And as soon as you get that intuitive sense, this isn't good, it doesn't feel good, stop right there. Put the boundary down right there. Don't keep, second guessing yourself, because that was the pitfall of the past, was to second guess yourself or to keep looking for the exact proof. Remember, sometimes you just don't get proof, especially with the more covert, sophisticated types, and often what'll happen is, you'll start off attracting an overt type of narcissist, or, a psychopath is just clearly off his rocker, and then, as it goes on, if you hadn't dealt with it, you find more and more sophisticated models, where they're just more sophisticated, more covert with the way that they manipulate and abuse people. It's not as obvious. So you may not get the obvious immediate proof, but if you get the feeling is proof enough. Listen to your feelings, trust your gut. That is like the number one thing, and don't be afraid to say no. If that's the arena that you're going to be, practicing your no, that's great. That's great. You get a lot of practice doing that, and look at it as a learning opportunity. Don't dive in there like looking for the love of your life. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But as the learning experience of getting back out there and dating and, self-expression and interpersonal relationships, and just see how things go and take them slowly. Someone just added in, those sites are full of narcs. Yeah, they are. Hopefully now you start to see it a lot quicker. I can see it in the messages usually right away. They'll say stuff. It's really clear. And you can just bypass all that, and that's the awesome thing about having that inbox thing, is you can just weed that stuff out in the inbox and not even need to take it to the next level of meeting a person in person. Also, I would be very cautious. Another thing, what you're revealing about yourself, especially on that first date when you're not so sure. Probably wouldn't tell the person where you live. Definitely wouldn't tell the person where you live. Maybe a general vicinity or something, but not for sure. If they try to well, I'm going to pick you up. And you're like, no, I'll just meet you there. And they're like trying to bully you into picking you up at your house. Just cancel the date. Just take it all away. Take it right off the table immediately, because that person is bullying you and they're always going to bully you, if it's starting that way. So, if they don't respect what you're comfortable with and what your boundaries are, just say no. Just say no. Don't tell them all the places that you go. If you don't have a lot of friends because you're recovering from a lot of these kinds, a big relationship, and then you realize a lot of your friends are toxic and you got all those people out of your life and now you're kind of alone, do not tell them that. Do not paint yourself as the lone gazelle, because they will hone in on that and they'll be like, okay, nobody's checking up on him or her. That's a perfect target, So talk about your friends, talk about, things that you do and people that are around you and stuff like that too. I almost forgot that one. Well, this is great advice. Thanks, guys. Good. Okay, someone says, I'm currently being covertly stalked via all forms of technology by a person who pretended to be my friend for years. It's only in retrospect that I look back to plenty of stuff that are now dubbed red flags. It's like very covert, subtle ambient abuse by proxy, maybe gang stalking. I don't know yet, but it's been crazy. I started to learn about narcissistic personality disorder and cluster B personality disorders through researching psychology and psychopharmacology as interests. He used to do things that I recognize later, that things like throwing temper tantrums like a 3-year-old over me not giving him a cigarette. And I then realized that was the grandiose sense of entitlement because I got my cigarettes myself. He didn't like that. And the crazy behavior and gaslighting, too much to fit in here. Just trust me. I know. But the thing is, I've ditched my mobile phone and laptop and barely use anything. I've even had my internet service provider send me letters in the mail to say that there was malware on one or more of my, it got cut off there. Okay, I'm not sure what the end of that was. If you're being stalked on technology, okay, so one of my awesome, amazing goddess clients told me she was being stalked by an ex-psychopath, and he was sending her emails. It was just one person. You're talking about multiple people, I think, here. This was just one person, but he was sending her emails, and it was through, his service provider. I don't know if it was Cox or whatever, Comcast or whatever it was. So she went ahead and contacted, Cox or Comcast, whatever, forwarded them all of these emails and said, I would just like you to know what this customer of yours is utilizing your services, to bully and harass me. And I would just like to bring this to your attention. I thought that was fucking fantastic. I wouldn't have even thought of that. So now I know that's an option. And it's great when people talk about these experiences, because then we learn about more options, to not feel like a victim, to not allow somebody to make you feel that way. And I would go to the police. I would get, I would get a stalker protection order. I'm not sure what country you live in, what the situation is in your country. Here in USA, we can get protection orders. It can be someone that you've never met in person. It could just be someone that's stalking you online. They'll track them down. They'll track down IP addresses and everything. They may even get like the feds involved, especially if it's a multiple state scenario. That's typically what happens, is you have to get the feds involved because they're different states and areas and jurisdictions. So again, I'm not sure where you're at. And I'm really sorry that you're going through that. It's good that you're doing research here, and this friend of yours that you've had for years. If you have friends in common, you need to get that friend out of your life. You need to get all those friends in common out of your life if they're still friends with the predator, the abuser, because you're not going to feel safe. You can never be safe with that person because they're still in contact. So if there's anyone else in your life that's still connected to any of those abusive people, I would get rid of them immediately and block them in every way, shape, and form, online, on the phone, on all that. Um, okay, a person from earlier said, thanks, Meredith. Yes, he was my ex, and he told me to treat his mom with respect, even though she was awful to me. Thanks so much. I felt like a bad guy of years, but I was just setting boundaries. And yes, it was hard, and of course, ended up in us splitting. Yeah. You know, when your partner doesn't have your back, when your partner, this is the abuse by proxy that the other person was just talking about. When your partner is allowing his parent or his whomever to abuse you, that's abuse by proxy. You know, could be that your ex was a narcissist and was getting off on that. Could be that your ex was an unhealthy codependent who just didn't have the balls to stand up to his own narcissistic parent, you know, and create those boundaries. Either way, it's not a safe or healthy situation. You know, if anybody finds themselves in a partnership or situation where you're not on the same team, you need to look for something else. It's just never going to work. You're never going to feel safe. You're never going to be safe with someone who doesn't have your back, who's not on your team. Someone says, I am online dating, and let me say it is crazy how well you can tell who is a possible narc after listening to these Q&As and videos of narcs. Online dating is like a state fair. Great people watching, aka narc shielding, LOL. I had a few guys try to tell me about our future lives over text. I knew right away that was a red flag. Okay, awesome. So you're gaining a lot of, you know, learning experience through those messages and just checking out people's profiles and stuff. Sometimes you can just feel it in a photo, you know, too. But yeah, all of that, now that you know what to look for, it is so much easier to see it. You don't have to be afraid like before. You know, you just got to listen to your inner trust, to listen to your intuition. When you get a feeling, just listen to that, go with that 100%, no matter what they're telling you. And if that person is not respectful of your boundaries from the get-go, immediately walk away. Don't wait to diagnose them and figure out if they're an NPD or a BPD or an ASPD. Just get away from that person as quick as possible. And, you know, check out the inbox and see what else is in there. You know, next, and maybe a period of time you don't meet anybody, you know, but it's a lot better that way than to settle for someone who is not going to be a good person in your life. You know, whether they are a manipulator and an abuser and a predator, or just completely unstable and toxic in that way, or a very toxic and unhealthy codependent who has a lot of issues, or maybe it's none of the above. Maybe it's just a person who just doesn't really have a lot in common with you, and they just don't really treat you like you matter. They're not really, is how you feel like when you see them, and they're like, they're not really happy to see you. They're not excited to see you. They're not emotional about seeing you. Don't hang out with that person, you know, because in the rest of your life, you're just going to feel like meh, because you're going to feel like the person who's with you isn't all that into you. It's not really exciting. You can't get really excited about anything. There's no real deep passion and connection. Wait for the better connection. You know, it's better to be alone and spend time alone and working on yourself and doing the things that you want to do and hanging out with your friends and creating your new family and support group and doing that stuff and keep doing that work until the right person comes across. And then suddenly it's like, holy shift, you know, this is a whole different pattern. This is nothing like the past. And this person, I matter to this person. They're showing me that with their actions. It's not love bombing. It's like open expression, and we're talking about things, and it's like a deep connection. And that's awesome. You know, and this person shares common values and similar lifestyle, and you get each other like immediately. You know, you don't feel like you're being judged. If you feel like you're being judged, walk away. You're always going to be judged by that person. You know, you're never going to be comfortable. You're never going to feel good in your skin. You're never going to feel good about yourself, because you're always going to feel like you're being judged. And then you're going to be editing yourself. It's going to be just like childhood all over again, you know? So take your time, wait for the right person, you know, and use everything else as a learning experience. You know, maybe you go on a lot of first dates and that's it. You just go on a date and you have a drink and you're like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. It's not going to be a good situation. It's okay. That's okay. That's not a failure. That's a success because you're learning something. And every date that you go on, you're learning something new. You're learning something new about what you're looking for in a partner, and you're learning something new about yourself in some way. You learn something new about yourself. Maybe what you want, what you don't want, who you are, how you want to be in relationship with other people. You know, that's the awesome opportunity that's there. Someone says, I was so emotionally abused in my relationship with my ex-narc that I ended up with such low self-esteem now. I feel like I built a wall around myself and don't let anyone in because I don't want to be hurt like that ever again. Even at work, I get my feelings hurt so easily and take everything so personally. My ex made me feel like shit, and so did my narcissist mom. I don't have many friends because I realized how many narcs I attracted as a codependent all my life, but now I feel so lonely. Is there a good hobby that you could suggest that I could try, or places I could meet caring and nice people? Any suggestions on how I can deal with my sensitivities at work? So with the sensitivities, you got to have boundaries. You got to have good boundaries so that people can't hurt your sensitivity. You can still be yourself, and you can still be sensitive and psychic and aware and open and that kind of stuff, but having boundaries around that to keep yourself safe, you know, and that includes what you're sharing with other people. It's not safe to share deep things with toxic people because they will use that against you in some way, shape, or form. And you want to be very cautious about that, especially at work. I would, if there's any toxic people at work, I would simply talk about work and nothing else, and not have any unnecessary communications, you know, unless something is going on at work and we have to talk about that. Other than that, I would have nothing more to talk about with people like that. That would be the boundary that I would set. It would make it really clear. Is there a good hobby, you know, or places you could meet caring and nice people? I wish I had a recipe for that. You know, I mean, I would suggest starting with things that you're into. Like, what are you into? You know, like, are you into dancing salsa? Are you into watching football? Are you into bar trivia? Are you into vegan food? You know, like, what the thing, book club, someone says here, book club at the library would be a great way to meet friendly people. What are you into? Are you a book person, right? Is that your thing? Maybe that's your thing. But like, whatever that is, I would find groups, you know, maybe look on meetup.com, see if there's any groups in your local area in particular interests, you know, areas of interest that you have, to see if you can meet. Someone else suggested here, a walking club. That's awesome. You get some energy, exercise from that too. You know, check out some things like that where you can meet other people who have similar values and lifestyles and habits, because then, you know, you already have something in common. And again, no matter where you are, suit up before you leave the house, you know, with your boundaries, and recognize that there could be these people anywhere. You know, don't let it stop you from living your life. Don't let it stop you from meeting new people and trying and exploring new things, right? But at the same time, balance that with the awareness of these people are everywhere. And you just want to always be checking in with yourself and how you're feeling, and how the interaction with someone is feeling, or how the interaction in the group is feeling, and how you feel afterward when you go home. Like, do you feel good? Do you feel uplifted? Do you feel pumped? Are you really excited to see these people again? That's awesome. But if you go home and you feel drained and exhausted, and you're like overthinking again and again that thing that that person said, or that weird question that they asked, and it felt like they were trying to make you feel self-conscious, and then this, like, when that kind of stuff happens, it's not a good situation, you know. So keep looking for good fits. Don't settle for something that doesn't feel good or put yourself in danger again, you know. And you know, you mentioned like you feel like your feelings get hurt easily. You take things so personally. So when people are saying things, you know, narcissists will always do that. They'll always try to make you feel bad about something, about who you are or how you look or what you do. And you just got to get to that point where you have no fucks to give, you know, where you just don't care about what they say. And it's easier said than done. And it takes practice to stop caring about what other people think. But this is a big part of the codependency recovery, is stopping to care what other people think, is stop looking for the approval and the validation outside, or what would people think of you if you did this or said that or wear this or whatever. None of that matters. That's all their stuff. That is all about them. That has nothing to do with you. And, get to the point where, you look at those as an opportunity to practice depersonalizing that, where you see it for what it is. You see it like, well, they're trying to fabricate jealousy. They're trying to guilt trip you. They're trying to triangulate you with that person, and look at it clinically and sterilely in that way, where you're utilizing like these terms, the technical terms and things that they're doing. So you can see it in that way. And then you become distanced from that. You become separate from that. You're observing that versus being caught in the reaction, because that's where they get you, is when they get you to react, to take things personally, and then you go on the self-defense. And when you're on the self-defense, you feel like crap, you're getting into a deeper and deeper hole, and then you just feel like you're plagued with doubt afterwards. So don't let them hook you into that. Just have no time, no energy for that kind of stuff. And yeah, you're right. It's like, it's reminding you what happened with your mom. That's why it's there. It's to remind you about that dynamic, and to teach you that, or to give you the opportunity that you can learn a new pattern, that you don't have to keep playing that role. You don't have to keep responding in the same way that your mom trained you to respond. You're now an adult. And, as you're dealing with this current situation at work, you're going to start to empower yourself more, not just there, but also in your relationship with your mom. If she's part of your life in any way, you're going to find it a lot easier, not to put up with her bullshit, because you're not eating anybody else's shit at work anymore. So don't take it personally. Check out Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements. Like, the number one rule, I think it's number one, is it's not personal. Like, what people say and what people do is a lot more about them than it is about you. And the whole reason that the narcissist does that, to make you feel like shit, is because that is a projection of their own self-hatred. They hate themselves so much. They are so deeply ashamed of who they are, because deep down they know who they are. And that's why they have to project that on someone else, because it makes them feel better about themselves. So when you don't enable that, and you don't allow them to make you the brunt of that, then they have to deal with that. They have to either go find someone else or deal with their own feelings, because you don't allow them to take them out on you. Someone else suggested yoga classes. Yeah, any of this kind of stuff, like whatever you're into, like, what is it that you're into? What do you love? What do you enjoy? Or what do you have like a curiosity about, you always want to learn about? Maybe you never took a yoga class, or maybe you never took like a tango class or something, and you just decide that at your age, you want to go buy a pair of dancing shoes, and every Thursday night, you want to go dancing and meet some people and get some exercise and feel amazing and reset your whole brain on the dance floor, and, have an awesome positive experience. And maybe eventually you get to know more and more people there. And, I really recommend finding out what your interests are, because that's part of your self-discovery. A big part of yourself you probably lost in a relationship with a narcissist. A big part of yourself you probably lost growing up with a narcissistic parent, because you couldn't be yourself. They made you the extension of them. You became engulfed in them, or completely ignored. And you weren't able to have a healthy sense of self. So now as an adult, finding that healthy sense of self is like, so what am I into? What do I like? And doing those things that you love. Someone says, I suck at yoga compared to real yogis, but 3 times a week I light candles and put on nice music and try yoga. I sleep so well. No judgment and mostly deep breathing. After the narc relationship ended, I really needed this me time. That's awesome. Yeah, I love to do that kind of stuff. It's just you. It's just you, and you're alone with yourself, and you tune into things, and you have realizations about things, when you meditate, when you do yoga, when you do Qigong, when you dance, when you walk, when you move your body, you're moving your muscles, and you're moving your cellular memory. It's like when you're walking, when you're dancing, things can pop into your mind. You can have like spontaneous flashbacks of things, or spontaneous revelations about things that you're always trying to understand, or some pattern in your life. Really amazing stuff can come out of that. So if you have any desire to try any kind of new, form of exercise or meditation, or like yoga practice or dance, highly recommend that kind of stuff, because you get so much with that one activity. You get the possibility of making a community connection there. You get exercise and your body gets healthy. You get psychological exercise as well, some kind of spiritual, connection with yourself or tapping into something new. So many amazing things that come from that. That person also said, it's amazing. I used to think I had to be a pro, but just trying something new and really putting your all into makes life so rewarding. Exactly. And if you were raised by a narcissistic parent, you were taught that like you had to be really good, right? You couldn't just do something and just do it because you enjoyed it. You had to do it and be the best, or like you weren't good enough, or like it was never good enough. And like there's the self-judgment and stuff. So if you catch yourself in that kind of situation, you want to remind yourself that you don't have to be the best at everything. You don't. You can do something just because you enjoy it, just because it's fun, just because you love it. You don't have to be the best. You don't have to put that pressure on yourself, because then it's like it kills the whole thing when there's this enormous pressure. When you're in the yoga class and you're looking around the room, and you're like, man, everybody's so much more flexible than me. It's so unfair. I look like a retard. You want to try to get out of that self-judgment space and recognize those are the old voices, the programming probably from childhood. You're always being criticized and you're not good enough. You're not good enough. So you're measuring yourself up with someone else. And so instead you can turn that comparison inward and say, okay, I'm going to be the best version of me today. Tomorrow, I'm going to be the best version of me. The day after, I'm going to be the best version of me. And I'm continually going to be the best version of me. I'm not in competition with anyone else. There's plenty to go around, and we can all be good at yoga, or I don't have to be the best at yoga or the best at whatever to enjoy it. Really doing things because you enjoy it. This person says, oh yes, I was a terrible basketball player. I felt like a loser because I wasn't as athletic as my dad, the champ. One time he said, I can't believe I had so many words and my kids didn't even get one. That killed me a little bit. Yeah, that was just a shitty way to put you down. That sucks. I'm sorry. This kind of stuff is very typical in the narcissistic household. Well, they'll say stuff like that, and as an adult now, you got to get those voices out of your head, get out there and do something new, teach yourself how to feel good about things, and teach yourself how to not judge yourself so much. And you'll hear that in your inner dialogue, that inner criticism. You learned that from one of your parents probably, and practice overriding that, so you don't let those voices continue to dictate how you have to live your life. Someone says, you're right. I don't really have a healthy sense of myself. I spent a lot of the time in my relationship with my ex focused on him because that's how he set up the relationship. He'd accuse me of things I never did. He lied, he cheated, he emotionally abused me. He created so much drama that I got lost in trying to heal him and fix him and his wounds that I lost focus on myself. Exactly. That's the whole thing. So you come in as the healer, the fixer, that brand of codependency, right? Where you make the other person your responsibility. He does all these things to hurt you, and there's all this drama going on in yourself, and you're always trying to fix the relationship, to fix him, to fix yourself, to do things the best. And you just totally lose sense of who you are, because you've now become the role that that person that person wants you to play in their life. And it's probably the same damn role you've been playing your whole life, right? Maybe a different flavor, a little bit different nuance. This is a unique person. They have, slightly different needs, but what you'll see is the pattern is the same across the board. And when you recognize those patterns, that's when you can really change things. So focusing on yourself, getting to know yourself in the aftermath, that's the great thing. That's why you don't want to jump into another relationship, because you're going to do the same thing again. You're not going to find yourself. You want to be really clear about who you are before you come to the table with another person, because that way, one, you're not going to lose yourself, and two, you're going to be able to radiate as who you are, and they're going to get to know you, and they're going to get to see who you are. Hopefully they're a healthy person and they're able to recognize you as a separate, human being who has your own life path, versus the narcissist who wants to mold and create you into the person that they want you to be in their life. Someone says, here's the weird part that I don't understand. My dad likes to tear me down, but he won't let anyone else. Maybe he's not a true narc, but he truly set me up to be with an narc. I am drawn to men that are like my dad. My dad is all about himself. It confuses the hell out of me. He thinks poking jokes at me is loving, but it hurts. I told him this, but he still does it. Yeah. it's interesting that you say, my dad likes to tear me down, but he won't let anyone else. I'm assuming you mean he won't let anyone else tear you down. And that's what I noticed about my mom too, is like, yeah, yeah, she would get seemingly really upset when someone else took advantage of me, but have no problem doing it herself. But also what I noticed was that it was like when she was upset because someone else was hurting me, what I realized is she wasn't upset that I'm hurt. She was almost like in disdain that I allowed it to happen. You know, you can't let him do that and get back up, you know, that kind of stuff. And like, just, yes, she says, you know, like forcing me to have more contact with that person, to get back in contact with that person, which is the worst thing to do, you know. So it's tricky. It's very tricky because they want you as their victim. They don't want you to be exhausted as someone else's victim, serving someone else. Serve them as the master, you know. I think it's something like that. I think that's the dynamic. And I did not even get that until like the last year. Yes, but it's like, how do you expect me to be strong when you tore me down so often? Right, because they don't see that. They don't see that at all. They just don't. You know, they can't see the self-responsibility in it. They can't see their actions, their responsibility, and how they treated you and how they taught you that. They have no clue. I've never met someone that had a similar situation. I bet a lot of us did. I bet we just didn't realize. Just like I said, I didn't even realize this, you know, until this year. And then I was like, oh shit. And maybe I heard it in one of those videos. It was like, you know, you have a narcissistic mother if, and it named all the things. And maybe one of them was this. And then I was like, oh my God, that's what it is, you know. And then I was watching this series with my mom when I went to visit called The Fall. And it's about a psychopath killer, serial killer. And my mom cracked a comment about his wife, who was the enabler. You know, his wife was like clueless about what was going on, who she was married to, who she was sleeping next to. She had no idea. You know, and my mom made some comment like, boy, she is just blissfully ignorant, or like, it wasn't that phrase, but it was something like that. And I wish I could remember the words, but it was like she expressed her disdain for that woman for being a victim. And then I was like, wow. And I understood, like, that was it. It was like when I was a victim of someone else, it was like disdain, like she was poking at me for having been someone else's victim, and completely oblivious to the fact that she's doing the same thing in a different way. Okay, someone says, just to add, I don't know why the rest of that message didn't send. I typed it all out and sent, but it's more of the type of thing like he's made it difficult to get evidence to take to the police. Don't know if he's got some sort of software like spyware. It's like he's watching everything I'm doing, keeping an eye on me for some reason, and all my devices react to it. Also, he covertly mentioned and proved it to me on several occasions. So scenarios like before, we would hang out, I'd be alone in my room listening to music, like not mainstream or coincidental, but like very obvious. He's have practically my whole playlist downloaded. It's like obsessive stalking. And this was around a period in time I'd now consider a re-idealization Hoover technique. Sucks. And also I've thought about the only way of stopping all this would be to just go on the run alone, saving money to get away and just travel it. Took so long to convince my family, but they say he will eventually move on to another victim. But I read that they have to make, and it cut off again. Maybe you just think he's making it difficult to take the plea. Maybe he's just making indirect threats. Indirect threats are still threats. Take those to the police. Take everything you have. If you suspect there's some kind of spyware on your machine, I would go to a professional and I would have them scan it. I would have them find the spyware, eradicate it, and get it off your device. You know, if that's what's going on. I mean, that's incredibly abusive. It was certainly, it's against the law. Hopefully they can also even trace where it came from, you know, so that you can, you know, file some sort of federal felony charge or however that works in your country. I'm not sure where you live. But I would absolutely not put up with that. Someone says, my dad always got upset to other people about how I never said, love you, bye, at the end of the phone call or when I left, but he would never, ever initiate it. Sometimes I would call my dad to see how he was and he would answer the phone, What do you want? Obviously, I won't call you if you always think I just want something. Sometimes I could call my father just to talk, and he would be almost creeped out that I had nothing that I needed from him. He would say, why did you call me if you have nothing you need? It's a complete mind fuck. Yeah. I think you're no contact with him, right? It's so funny that you mentioned that, no, I talk to him weekly. Okay. But we are not close. Okay. I would be careful if those boundaries are not working for you, if he's really bothering you, I would space out the conversations more and more and more, eventually talking once a month, then every other month, I would just make it, I look at him as a child. Yeah, he is a child. He's an adult child. And yeah, it is like you're the parent. Yeah. I would be cautious, because like how far set back are you getting after every conversation? Does it take you 4 to 5 hours after that conversation to get back to your emotional state before the conversation? If that's the case, it's not good. It's not so far this much. If it's not affecting you that much, then that's okay. But I get in stupid, dumb relationships because of him, which is subconscious. So it could have to do with you enabling that in your life and having that in your life. If I were you, I would look at the boundaries and ask yourself, where can you set a different boundary around that? Maybe calling left. If you're the one who initiates the contact too, then that's easy. It's not even like he's calling you and you got to like ignore the phone calls. I would just less and less have contact. And the more unpleasant it gets, the less and less I would have contact with that. He lives 0.5 miles from me. Okay. It doesn't mean you have to see him. It doesn't mean you have to have contact, even though he's that close to you, and it may be that it's just not healthy for you, because it might be that just being around him keeps you locked in that dynamic. And maybe you need to have a lot of space from that, at least for a period of time, so you can heal that dynamic within yourself, completely break free from that pattern, and then not be attracting these same kinds of types in your life. And then if you decide to get back in contact, then notice how different things feel, and then maybe make some new decisions about your boundaries and how you want to manage that. I love him and he mostly leaves me alone, but yes, he's the reason I date awful men. When I date a guy that is actually right for me, my dad will give me endless amounts of shit. See, that's just not healthy. That's just not healthy, because he's planting doubt in your mind, and doubt is the kryptonite of human potential. It seems so innocuous, but it will poison your mind. It will poison your mind, that kind of doubt. And I know it's so hard when they're parental situations, and you love your parent. Like for some people, they have a situation with their child and they love their child, but their child is a toxic influence in their life, same kind of situation. The familial bonds are hard because they're heavy and they're full of obligation and guilt and that kind of stuff. But these are not healthy situations. And maybe you at least need to set a boundary for yourself for a period of time so that you can break those patterns. It's going to be almost impossible to break that pattern while you're still in contact like that. Getting that space for a while will allow you to see things about yourself, will allow you to heal some things about yourself, because you're going to be taking a step away from that role. Because even if you don't want to play the role, even if you don't think it's really affecting you, it is, because the reality in your life is like that pattern is still happening in your life. It's so hard. I learned most of my family is toxic. I love them, but I know I need someone different. I was thinking of moving at least 25 miles away to the other side of the city and starting new. I think that would be so good for me. That sounds like a great idea. Getting more space, moving to at least another part of the city, that's just yours. You don't have a lot of memories there. You're not quite as close, nearby to where they live. And I know it's really hard. It's really hard when, like you said, you learn most of your family is toxic. It's so hard to cut those cords, or to at least mitigate the contact to a more minimal level. But, it really comes down to, you have to choose yourself first. And if it's detrimental to you, it's not healthy, family or not, blood or not. If that's having a detrimental effect on you, that's not a healthy situation. I meet people easily, so I'm excited to take this journey, but I will get a lot of guilt. It's hard to ignore guilt from anyone. Narcs are so good at it. They're very skilled at that. Very, very skilled. And yeah, they're going to project guilt, but don't respond to that. Don't give in to that. And it takes practice, because your conscience will still be triggered by the guilt tripping. You'll still go, well, maybe, but then catch yourself and stop that and say, you know what? This is guilt tripping. This person is utilizing false guilt to try to manipulate me to do what they want. That's not healthy for me. I'm not going to participate in this dance. I'm going to step out. I'm not going to give in to that. Do you think there's a good way to confront someone about their guilt tripping? You can try, but chances are they're just not going to say it. They're going to justify it. What'll happen is, if you're like, when you do this, it's actually guilt tripping. It's a form of covert, manipulation. And it's like also another form of emotional blackmail. And, it doesn't feel good. And I'm not going to respond to that anymore, And typically what they'll do is they'll twist it around. So again, they'll use another layer of guilt tripping. Somehow it's your fault. Or they'll use another covert manipulation tactic like rationalization. Well, I just did it because you did that. Or minimization. Well, it really wasn't that bad, in some sort of way. Or you really didn't mean it in that way. They'll always follow it up with another covert manipulation tactic. And when you see that, then that's who that person is. They're a manipulator. If this technique doesn't work, they're going to use another. And sometimes it's just helpful to see that and to recognize it and to call them out and just watch them use more and more and more of those covert aggressive manipulation tactics, because it's so clear who they are and how they just do that, and the only way that works is if you give in, if you enable it, if you buy the rationalization, if you accept it and you're like, okay, you're right. Then they won. Then you enabled the abuse, and then they keep doing it. But if you stop enabling it, if you stop buying the excuses, you stop buying the rationalizations, you stop buying the minimizations, then it's a different situation. Then you're not enabling it anymore. And it doesn't work if you don't enable it. It just doesn't. It has to be a hook. Somebody has to play the game in order for it to work at all. And that's our power, is walking away from that. That's the power of opting out. It's the power of no contact or gray rock contact. I notice myself doing it more now. I learned how to accept friends' boundaries. I wish I would have learned this earlier. I had so many narc fleas growing up. Yeah, it's good, that you recognize that now. You're owning the self-responsibility of it now. You didn't know then. You didn't know any better. But once you found out, you gained the awareness, you accepted the self-responsibility of your thoughts, feelings, needs, and actions, and you're changing your actions. That's an awesome sign, good qualities. That's a person who is growing, versus the narcissistic manipulator who does not acknowledge what they're doing, who does not make changes, who does not improve themselves and does not grow. And they stay an adult child their entire lives. They just don't grow up. So it's good when you notice those things, and you recognize, like, we all grew up with so many of the patterns that we learned in childhood. Those things that, like, you hate about your mom or you hate about your dad, and you're like, oh my God, I just did that thing that my mom does. Oh my God, I just did the thing my dad does. It's good that you recognize it and then stop doing it, right? Not doing it again. That's where you change your behavior. You make a different action, you take a different action, and you change the game. I wonder when it becomes too late for someone. I always think I could have been a narc. Any of us could have been, for whatever reason, we adopted the opposite survival strategy of codependency. That's just the way it worked out, right? That was just your life path. And, thankfully, that's not the path you took, and thankfully you have the ability to have a healthy human conscience. You have the ability to self-examine. You have the ability to call yourself out on your shit that stinks, and then you take action to change that. That's awesome. That's the best you can do. That's the best any of us can do. think I missed one up here. Let me go back. Private message. Just when I think I'm making progress, some trigger out of nowhere pops up and sets me back. It takes me a couple of days sometimes to recover. I get angry that I allow flashbacks to affect me. I'm angry that he had so much control over me during the relationship and can still affect me without doing a thing. Sometimes I wonder if he has this mental telepathy of knowing when he's on my mind and then somehow makes the universe create this trigger. He has the unbelievable control over women that I am now learning about. So that's the thing, those triggers that pop up, just when like you're really making progress, that person shows up on the radar again, that kind of thing. I call that synchronicity. And it's just like the language of the universe, the way these weird, meaningful coincidences happen. I don't believe in mere coincidence. And, when it happens, ask yourself, okay, what's the message here? Why is this trigger popping up right now? What is it trying to tell me? What am I trying to understand? What can I learn from this? And ask these open-ended questions so you can dig into that. And you said you're angry that you allow the flashbacks to affect you, that he had so much control over you and can still affect you now. So I would work on the anger in those flashbacks. So when you have the flashback that makes you angry, it's usually because you didn't stand up for yourself, right? You let him do whatever, you enabled it. So in the flashback, I would rewrite it and I would be like, well, if this is happening right now, I'm doing this instead. I'm standing up and I'm calling you out on your bullshit, or I'm walking away, I'm moving out, I'm whatever. And so that way you start to empower yourself by empowering those flashbacks, because when you have the flashback, your subconscious mind can't tell the difference between what you're imagining and remembering and what's actually happening in this reality. So that's why the flashbacks are so powerful. It's like you're reliving the past. In order to rewrite the past, you want to rewrite that perspective with something empowering. Like, well, if this is happening right now, because it's totally happening in my body, you got the anxiety, you got the whatever you're noticing, right? If this is happening right now, this is what I do instead. And maybe you practice it and you imagine that person in front of you and you tell them those things that you wanted to say. I wanted you to do this, or, I needed you to do that and you did this, or you hurt me when you said that. And, you go through these things like, I wanted you to listen to my feelings and you refuse to listen to my feelings. You just shut them down. You refuse to accept any accountability for what you did, whatever you want to say, maybe you even need to yell and get this out and get angry, at this person, but get this emotion out, really allow yourself to feel that, not repress it. And then I would practice rewriting and overriding those flashbacks with empowering messages. Wondering if he has the mental telepathy, probably not. Probably what's happening is that the energetic cords are connected and unconsciously he's connected to that. He probably has no actual conscious idea about that, but just unconsciously something drives him to write an email or a text or contact you or whatever's happening. That kind of thing. And that's what happens. That's usually what happens, that synchronistic sort of thing. And I would practice cutting those cords, cutting the energetic cords so that doesn't keep happening. So that person stays out of your life. And you might need to keep doing it several times. Someone says, yeah, the flashbacks are so awful. I'm having them more than I ever did over the last 5 months, but the seasons are changing. And I wonder if that's why. Interesting. Maybe the fall reminds you of something. If that's what you mean, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it could be that the fall is reminding you, Minnesota. Yeah. Could be that the fall is reminding you of something that happened around this time of year, many years ago. We hunted a lot with our dogs. Yeah. Fall's hunting season, right? So a lot of people have this sort of thing like coming into the holidays or certain anniversaries, or just like, the anniversary of the breakup or the anniversary of the betrayal, or the, 1 year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, right? And you're still thinking, oh my God, this time of year, last year, this was happening, right? So what I do when I have those things is like, oh my God, a year ago right now, like, the shit was hitting the fan in Peru, and wow, was life about to change? And then I just tell myself, whew, glad that's not happening right now. Glad that's in the past. That's not happening anymore. That's over now. Thank God. you know, and I just keep rewriting those flashbacks and those memories. A lot of us get those like seasonal or dates or periods of time kinds of flashbacks because of the time of year. So yes, just like you said, I have to create new fall memories. Also, it was our anniversary. Okay, good. Lots of issues at the same time. Okay, yeah. So now you know this season is a trigger for you. So you want to rewrite the fall, create some new rituals, you know, get yourself some pumpkin candles and smell that deliciousness and bake some pumpkin stuff, Oktoberfest beer. Yeah. Get some new activities with friends, maybe decorate something in your house, maybe buy a new sweater for yourself, you know, a new coat for the winter coming, or a pair of boots or something. Anything. Create new fall rituals. You know, maybe if you're a sports fan, you know, maybe you want to get involved in something like that, whatever it is. But yes, create new memories this time of year, or whatever time of year it is. You know, if it's like, if it's the holiday thing, which a lot of people get, then you want to create new memories and new rituals around the holidays so that you don't keep repeating that same stuff that reminds you of that person or the time that you spent, or a year ago right now, 5 years ago right now, this was happening. Those are really, really common things. Thank you so much for bringing that up. You know, I bet a lot of people go through that, and it's a great idea to create new memories. Holidays are the worst. I noticed a lot of people in the support group I'm in online get super depressed over holidays. Yeah, if you go to like a retirement community, like a, what do you call those? Assisted living homes. Wow. Like I used to volunteer doing like Qigong at this nursing home. You know, I started in like September, October, everything was amazing. All of a sudden, like right around Thanksgiving, just like everybody just goes down. There's one woman I saw, like literally she had this night and day, like she was doing so much better. Her macular degeneration was healing, like all these things were changing. And then it was like night and day. She was just despondent, like gone. And I tried to talk to her, and she was having some kind of spontaneous recall of her children and her husband, and, you know, the sadness and things that had happened around the holidays, and being alone now, you know, and she was just gone, just lost in the memories. And that's so sad, which is why you have to create new rituals. You know, if you're feeling depressed around the holidays, you got to do something else. You know, if you hate the holidays with your family, don't do the holidays with your family. Don't give into the guilt. Create your own rituals. You know, if you want to have Christmas in your underwear, smoking weed and watching movies all day and having a great fucking time by yourself with your dog or with your friends and eating awesome, delicious foods. And so like whatever you want to create as your new Christmas holiday ritual, whatever, do that. Do what makes you happy. Hang out with people that you actually want to be with. It doesn't have to be your blood family. It could be your friends in town who are awesome. It could be your friend from out of town who comes to visit from the holidays because she hates her family holiday thing too, you know, and you create a new tradition together, you know. So create new traditions, create new activities. Yes. You know, new rituals, new memories. That's the important thing. Because like, you know, it's same with like a place, right? You know, like if you're in a house, a space that you shared with someone, you got to like do something different, like paint a wall, redecorate, create new memories, start inviting more people over, have more friends over for dinner, that kind of thing. You know, eventually maybe you meet someone new, you're having a new relationship, and now they're creating memories with you in your house, or they're creating memories with you in the fall. And now, you know, you think about fall and you're like, oh, this is the time that we snuggle up and we go pumpkin patch picking or cider drinking or whatever. Someone says, my ex-narc and I sent out Christmas cards every year, and this made me so sad. Oh no, I have no one this year. I decided, nope, not letting this end. Now my cat and I are sending out cards. Might be weird, but why stop what I love to do? That's awesome. You love Christmas cards, and now you and your cat send out a cute you and your cat Christmas card. That's awesome. Someone says, I'm proud of myself for having the strength to leave an abusive relationship that I was so addicted to, but thought I'd feel so much better than I do. I thought the relationship sucked, but healing sucks too. It's hard work to recover from abuse. Narcs are so cruel and damaging. I can't wait till I laugh again and be happy. Yes. So as I've mentioned, this phrase that they use in some of the Spanish content on, you know, narcissistic abuse or psychopaths is what they call. sometimes where they say, you know, when she's, how does it go again? Con él está mal, sin él está peor. With him, she's bad. Without him, she's worse. And of course, you can apply that to a man as well. They just happen to be a little bit sexist about it. But, you know, when you're in the relationship, things are bad. It's an abusive relationship. You break up, you end it, you go into withdrawal. And now it's like immediately things are much worse. It's like, was it you or another person who asked me earlier, you know, about that aftermath and the 2 months after that, and just so hard, and the cravings and missing and all that, that'll happen. Literally is like withdrawing from heroin, withdrawing from abuse. And you wouldn't think that. It doesn't make cognitive sense, but that's the way it is. And that's the nature of the Stockholm syndrome and breaking that trauma bond. And yes, it's hard. And yes, it gets better. Yes, it gets a lot better. You just got to keep showing up for yourself, keep doing the work, you know, keep loving yourself, keep taking care of yourself, keep, you know, just digging in there and finding all of those things that you want to eradicate, all of those old patterns, all of those old roles, things that aren't you, things that you took on for someone else or because of someone else, you know, getting yourself right. When you get yourself right and you focus on that, it's like you kind of stop naturally focusing on them, because you naturally start to focus on yourself more and taking care of yourself. Make that your absolute priority, you know, and in those moments where you don't feel like doing shit, where you feel so shitty, you just want to lay down and sulk and sulk and sulk, you know, at a certain point, it's important to do that at the beginning in that PTSD crash. You've got to give yourself the time to feel those feelings and all. And then at a certain point, you got to start motivating yourself to do something different, because if you don't take that action to do something different, nothing ever changes. And the more new actions that you take, the more new results you will get from life, and the more new beliefs you will have about what's possible for you or what's even possible in life. And that creates like the whole new belief systems and new paradigms. And like, that's how you change your life, taking new actions, you know? So when you get to that point where you're just like, we're just going to watch a movie and sulk here and not do anything, just ask yourself like, okay, if that's, you know, that's the distraction mechanism, what's a different activity that I could do that wouldn't be a distraction, that would instead be something beneficial for me, that would feel good for me, that I would enjoy doing, or that would feel good for my body or be good for my health. You know, if you can do nothing else, get out and take a walk. Take a 30-minute walk, a brisk walk like you're running late. And you'll reset your mind, and your body will feel better. You'll feel more energized when you come back in the house. Now maybe you got a little bit of a clearer head, and then you're like, you know, I really didn't take good care of myself today on the nutrition front. So let's make some dinner. Let's make a good, you know, or let's go to the grocery store. Let's go get some fresh produce, you know, make a delicious dinner. And, or, you know, let's do this thing for myself that I really want to do, or let's go research that thing that I've been really curious about and interested in, and just couldn't focus on because I was so distracted with that other stuff. If you can't clear your mind, you can't clear your state, you want to move your body. That's the best way to shift your state. Walk, dance, jump around, do some kind of, shake your body, you know, do something. You know how dogs, like, they do that thing. My dog does that all the time. It's like the way she shakes off stress, you know, and anxiety. And so do that kind of thing too, where, you know, move your body, shake that stuff off so you can clear your state. You can shift your state into a different state, because you and only you can shift your mental state. No one can do that for you. Your friends can try to help, you know, make you laugh and like, you know, stuff like that. But you got to do that for yourself, because your friends can do everything they can do. And you could just be like, nah, yeah, but, right. So you got to decide that for yourself. And I recommend reading, if you're struggling with, you know, the mental state thing, I recommend reading Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. This is a phenomenal book. This will change your life. You know, he was a psychiatrist that was in World War II in the Nazi concentration camps. And he writes about that, and, you know, why some people survived and some people didn't under the same circumstances. And what he discovered was that, you know, everything in your life can be taken away from you. The one and only thing no one can ever take is your mental state, how you show up in every moment. No one can ever take that from you unless you give it to them. That's all you really have control over. So that's where you want to take control first, you know, and it's hard work. And it's like, there's the inertia in the beginning part, you know, because there was that comfortable numbness. of the relationship. So it's really hard to override that inertia at first. But once you get the ball moving, then you start gaining momentum. It becomes a lot easier. And then as you clear away the really heavy stuff, you unlock that stuff and you clear that stuff, and it gets a lot easier along the path. Don't give up on yourself. You know, keep the faith, keep investing in yourself. Someone says, just thought I'd ask, what's with the whole thing of at times when everything would be seemingly going cool, and then they do some weird shit? Like, for example, my stalker narc once invited me out for a drink and a meal with him and his chick. So then it was like his mind bent into this false reality of I was his offspring and his chick was my mother. It was the stranger than any trip I ever took. And trust me, I've had severe on the brink of death, ergo poisoning, and many more. I guess I just want to know what that sort of thing is all about. I'm older than him by 2 to 3 years, so it's very odd. Is it something to do with superiority? Possibly, or triangulation. You know, anytime there's another person involved, I would look at the triangulation factor. Also, if you could add how to deal with the angry flashbacks, like getting really, really wound up out of it. Almost your baseline state of consciousness has changed dramatically, and you go through a whole whirlwind of emotions. How to ground yourself or still the mind during the CPTSD flashback. That would be seriously appreciated. Okay, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the earlier session today, the grounding during the CPTSD crash or the flashback, and how that's triggering you into the past. Your physiology is reliving exactly as if that were still happening in this very moment. The exact same physiological responses are happening. It's like you're living the past. So the antidote is to be fully present in the here and now, to find something to focus on in the here and now. So like I was talking about in the earlier session, I use my hands, because I learned that from Carlos Castaneda's books. You know, his teacher taught him how to learn how to lucid dream was to practice looking at your hands in your dream. And if you can set that anchor of when I look at my hand, I remember that I am lucid, that I have control, right? So how do I apply that in this situation is, here's the flashback, I feel out of control and I'm living in the past. So how do I be in the here and now? I look at my hands, because my hands are always with me, versus something in your house or your apartment. It's not always going to be with you. You might be out, you know? So if you're out and that thing's not there, you know, having your hands or something like that, it's like right here and now. You stare at that one little line in your hand and just keep focusing and breathing in the here and now and bringing yourself into the here and now. You know, dealing with the anger of the flashbacks. I've talked about that quite a bit too in some of the recent Q&As, doing the anger exercises. You know, I recommend doing that where you imagine that person in front of you. You're in a safe place where you can express your emotions. You know, that's key. You have to be in the safe set and setting. But imagining that person is there, again, you're not contacting that person. You're just imagining that they're there. And you're telling them everything that you want to tell them, how you feel, how angry you are, how hurt you are by what they did, what a dickhead they are, you know, whatever it is, just get it out and get the anger out. You have to get that out of your body or it's going to eat at you. It will eat at you. It'll create inflammation, and then it can create autoimmune illnesses and cancers and all sorts of stuff. Like inflammation is the root of illness in the body, you know, and inflammation is anger. It's a blockage. It's like, that's in your body, right? It's in your emotional memory in your cells. So you have to get that emotion out. You have to purge that anger. Someone says, question whomever mentioned it. Oh, that's a great question, whomever mentioned it. Also, Meredith, totally get you on synchronicity. The universe has our backs. However, as Cabal Hermetica mentions, as above, so below, they deal with the same forces on their level as we do on ours. 11:11, 33:44 talked about this earlier. Now it's subtly nodded to me. Too cool, and you should recommend anyone healing study the esoterica. Yeah, so for some people, having some sort of spiritual practice is really helpful. I think it's absolutely imperative. You know, even the origins of AA and the 12-step program, like the 13th step was like was actually supposed to be LSD in the initial idea of this program. And then they took that out. But the idea was that the LSD would create some massive spiritual cathartic moment that would be the breakthrough, that then the person would do the work of the rest of the steps. And, you know, Jung, in his letters back and forth, I forget the name of that patient he had, you know, who spurned the whole idea of AA and all that, Carl Jung, in his letter to this patient who he was working with for over a year, and the patient, I can't remember if the patient was an alcoholic or something, an addict maybe, the patient was showing no signs of improvement, and Jung decided to discontinue the therapy, and the patient was upset, and Jung said, there's nothing more I can do for you. You know, all we can hope is that some sort of, you know, I can't remember the term he used, was some sort of like spiritual divine intervention will happen for you, because that's really the only chance you have, you know? And so like this spiritual connection for me has been the lifesaver. Like, you know, the book that I wrote, Freedom from the Story, was about that. Part of it was about my personal journey and, you know, going through the abuse and the trauma of things, but at the same time going through this massive spiritual awakening. And that is what kept me sane. That is what kept me healthy. That's what kept me learning and improving and having something bigger than myself to focus on and not feel so alone, and to have all of these practices like the holistic practices and whatnot that really helped me heal. Like even before I knew what narcissistic abuse was, I was still healing like a lot of these other issues, like the secondary symptoms of PTSD, even though I hadn't identified it as such, you know, and the secondary symptoms of abuse, which you don't necessarily recognize or related to the abuse if you don't see it spelled out, you know, that kind of stuff. So, you know, if anybody has, you know, any feeling of calling to any particular spiritual lineage or study or something, yeah, and you're, you know, in your recovery, it's a great time to start discovering whatever it is you feel drawn to. And only if you feel drawn to it. It's not for everybody. You know, some people might feel more at home in a church with a certain religion or a Bible or something like that. That's fine. That's their higher power, you know, so whatever that is for you. But I recommend that. And, you know, the spiritual thing too, which maybe some people get from religion, for me, it was like understanding the bigger picture of things, that in the bigger picture, you know, this person who presented as my enemy was actually some soul that my soul had a contract with. And this is just my belief. I'm not saying everybody has to believe this, you know, but I believe that before coming here, our souls make contracts with other souls that they play a certain role in our life. You know, they played the role of enemy because they decided, you know, they loved us so much, maybe at some soul level, they decided they would play this dire role in our lives to force us to face something, to deal with something, to motivate us to change and transform. Because without that motivation, maybe we would have just been complacent and not done anything, you know. And again, that doesn't mean that you want to have that person in your life in any way, shape, or form. It's a toxic person to have in your life, a dangerous predator to have in your life, you know, or at the very least, just like a completely chaotic storm that you don't want to be around because you're going to get sucked into that. You know, but being able to recognize the bigger picture of things and understanding that it was for a greater purpose. It wasn't because I deserved it. And it, you know, it wasn't because it was my fault. And it wasn't because, you know, bad things just happened to good people kind of thing. It was like, there was a lesson in there. There was something I can take from that and learn from that, some sort of spiritual awakening that I can have, some sort of way that I can improve myself and be better. Then I learned something from that situation, you know. And ultimately, the main thing that all of these people hit for us, you know, all of these narcissistic cluster B people, what they hit on is your childhood wound. It's what happens always. Even if you weren't raised by a narcissist, every now and then I'll have a client who tells me, and after we talk about it, like they really weren't raised by a narcissist, but there was something similar. There was some feeling that they had, some role that they played that led to the wound in their childhood, even though their parent wasn't like the narcissist or the borderline that they met later in life. But the feeling was the same. How they felt in that relationship, how they felt about themselves, how they felt about their role in the interpersonal relationship was the same. That was the wound. So ultimately, that is the gift that they have to offer us. And when we can look at it from this positive way, it's almost like it's so relieving of all the heaviness, you know, and it helps shift you out of that victimhood, out of the blame, because that's only one dimension. That's only one layer where that person is to blame. That person is responsible for what they did. It was their fault, that abuse that took place, you know. But if you just stay there, then you just stay in that victimhood your whole life. And then they win because they changed your life and they got you to like settle for this and just be stuck in this disempowerment. When you start to take 100% responsibility for yourself and recognize that, okay, that happened and you can't change that. And that was shitty. And that was horrible. And that was an awful thing to go through. And it was an awful thing to do to you. But now, you know, now you can own your life 100%. Now you can own that 100% so that you can shift your perspective of something so that you can gain some kind of learning and understanding from that and better yourself moving forward so that you don't stay stuck there. That's the beginning of being a survivor, is taking that 100% responsibility, owning your life, owning your choices, owning your actions, owning your feelings, thoughts, and emotions, and taking the empowerment of that now, changing things for yourself, not allowing that person to run the rest of your life because of that awful thing that they did to you, you know? And that's the thing. And I know like a lot of people have a really hard time with that in the initial phases of recovery. That's okay. You're mad. You're angry. You're allowed to be angry. You're angry because somebody hurt you. You're angry because somebody abused you, you know, and you got to get through that period, right? But eventually, hopefully you get to that period where now you're ready to shift out of that victimhood into the survivor nature of things and totally empower yourself and recognize that the only power you have over the past is your perspective of it now and moving forward. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. It's a little after 8 p.m. here on the West Coast. Thank you all so much for coming today. And I will keep you posted on, you know, if I'm going to change things. Unless you hear anything else from me, this is going to be the new link to our Q&A Mondays, both of them noon and 6. If for some reason I change that, I will do my best to get that word out via Facebook or YouTube, you know, that sort of thing, to get the word out so you guys will know. And I'm sending you all a big hug. I hope to see you next week.